Hello YouTube, and welcome to another video. And this video is going to be, rather than being a review, it's going to be one of my let's get technical videos again. Now, I'm not in the kitchen for this one. I'm going to be doing this one in the living room. But I wanted to discuss the Miele S7, or as what's more commonly known now as the Miele U1, the dynamic U1 upright cleaner. Now, I've seen a few of these on eBay that are going for spares and repairs because the owners say they've stopped working or they've stopped picking up, or basically what's been happening with some of them is that on the front, on the lower models, you have like a dial on the front of here, and then you have a couple of lights on the front panel. Now what they're saying is happening is that the one light is coming on and staying on red, and basically the machine is not coming on, or it's been used for a little while and this overheat light's coming on and the machine's cutting out. So what I needed to do on this video really is to talk about how we maintain one of these cleaners, and what do we do in the event that it gets blocked up, because on the face of it, it looks like a very, very complicated machine. And there aren't that many blockage ports or ways to clear blockages on this machine. And the usual reason that it overheats is because somewhere along the line in here there is a blockage. Now, whether that blockage is the bag, whether it's in the hose, whether it's in the back of the machine, whether it's in the floor head, somewhere in the air path that's causing the motor to overheat, there's usually a blockage in the machine. So we're going to discuss on this video what you have to do to maintain one of these machines and make sure that you don't get situations where the motor overheats, because if it overheats too often, what you might find is that when it does overheat after it's done it a few times, that red light will come on and it will never go off, so that every time you come to turn this on it will never start. It effectively will be what we call the red light of death. In other words, once that comes on and stays on and never goes off again, it's pretty much wrecked the thermal cutout on the motor. And quite a few of these are dying from the red light of death. This one here's got a red light as well, it's just in a slightly different place up on the top. But nevertheless, if you keep overheating these S7 machines, or the U1, it could really do terminal damage to it. So let's get the camera down and we will have a look at the machine and discuss what we have to do to maintain it. Now, one of the most important things to remember with any Miele cleaner is that the bags form part of the filtration system on these cleaners, and we mustn't be using what we call generic bags. Now, a generic bag is basically a bag that is designed to fit one of these cleaners but is not manufactured by Miele. Now let's give an example of what I mean by a generic bag. Okay. Now this is a generic bag. Okay. This bag is supposed to be a Unifit micro pour bag, right? Now when I bought a machine off somebody, this bag came in that machine. It was actually on an S5, and this bag is supposed to be the replica or aftermarket fit for the GN style of Miele bag. But the thing with these cheap bags, I mean, they may be cheaper to buy than a standard Miele bag, but they are actually a lot thinner material than a standard Miele bag. So these bags will get clogged up a lot quicker than a standard Miele bag. That will lead to problems in that the machine, before the bag is full, if you're picking up a lot of fine dust, will clog this bag and you'll start to lose airflow. When any machine loses airflow, that airflow is critical to the cooling of the motor in a clean air machine such as this. Most vacuum cleaners nowadays are what we call clean air or bypass machines, and their motors depend upon a through flow of air to keep them cool. Now that's the same with a bagless machine or a bag machine. It doesn't matter which you've got. If those motors get the airflow obstructed, they will overheat. On the motor is what we call a thermal cutout. If the motor gets too hot, that thermal cutout will cut out the power to the motor and the motor will turn off. And even though your machine's turned on at the switch, you won't get anything from the motor. And that's what you call an overheat. Normally that thermal cutout will then cool down and then make the circuit again, so the machine will come back on after half an hour or so. And that's what we mean by the red light on here. Now on this machine, it's actually this light here. It's the triangle light with the exclamation mark in it, right? So on the other machines which have the dial on, there's two lights, one here and one here. One's your carpet light and the other one's the on-off light. I think it's the on-off light which glows red. The motor turns off if it overheats. So if you've been using one of these cheap generic bags and that bag's become clogged, you may not notice that this bag full indicator has been going across to the red to indicate a full bag. And that might not even happen if you've got the power turned right down. If you're using it on a lower power setting, that doesn't always register a full bag, because all it is a vacuum gauge at the end of the day, which senses the back pressure in the bag housing. So the only thing that you're normally going to know is that it's not picking up off the carpet, or it might sound like it's strained. How a vacuum cleaner sounds when it's got a blocked hose. You notice the motor is straining, it's got a higher pitch to it. When you've used a machine for a while, you get to learn that the noise it makes when it's clogged. But if you keep on ignoring that clog, you're going to get an overheat. Right. So in a Miele you need to use the proper bags. Now that proper bag in this machine is the green bag. This bag's actually it's about half full now this is. These bags will hold an awful lot before they get full. But when they do get full, you need to just take it out and change the bag. Now what you also need to do from time to time is to replace this pre-motor filter. This motor filter comes in a pack of Miele bags. When you buy your Type U bags for this cleaner, you get one of these type of filters in. You may have to cut it down to size, so you take your old one out, literally by pulling that down. You take your filter out and you would put it next to your new filter on top of it and cut round it to make sure it's exactly the same size. And then you would put it back into the housing like so. Just put it back in there and then push that housing closed. So that's your pre-motor filter. That's important that is kept clean, especially if you've had a bag burst or you've had one that's come off the mounting or whatever have you and that's got clogged up with dirt. It must be kept clear. Okay, so that's the pre-motor filter, and what Miele recommend is you change that after every 4 bags used. In other words, once you've used a pack of bags and bought a new one, you'll change that filter. So then we put our bag back in simply by sliding it back onto the bag slide, push it all the way up, and then once we've pushed it in, we lift onto there. If it slips down slightly, that doesn't matter too much, because once you close the door, it pushes it back up, and that's properly loaded. Right, so that's dealt with the bags, and it's dealt with the pre-motor filter. Now what you also need to do, and what Miele say is if you're using a standard filter in here, is that after every 4 bags you also replace the exhaust filter. To get to that, you open that housing there, and inside is a filter. You pull that forwards towards you and then lift it out like so. Now this machine at the moment has got what they call a HEPA filter in. If your machine doesn't have one like this, it will have a cartridge grill with a normal type of filter in. You'd simply open that cartridge grill and replace the filter with one out of a pack of Miele bags. In other words, when you buy a pack of Miele bags, it will come with a pre-motor filter to go inside there and an exhaust filter to go inside this grill. If you're using a HEPA filter, you're supposed to change this after every 50 hours of use, or if you're using it for an hour a week, after each year. That deals with the exhaust filter. So if you've been using your cleaner for years and years and never replaced this, then really you ought to replace it, because this will be obstructing the airflow, and you can obtain these from Miele or from any spares website. These HEPA filters are around about £20 each. That's not cheap, But at the end of the day, if you bought one with a HEPA filter, really, unless you buy the grill from Miele to put the normal filters in, you need to replace this every 50 hours. Right, and that just slots back in here, like so, and that closes down. So that deals with all the filters and the bag. But what about if it's blocked up? If you've sucked something up that's blocked the cleaner, what then? Now, either the blockage could be inside the floor head here, basically, between the brush roll, and what happens is it comes inside the floor head, it comes through the floor head, and it comes up the back of the cleaner to this point here. Okay? This is what they call an inspection port. Now what we can do is to open this inspection port, enable ourselves to get a wire coat hanger or a long item down here or up there to look for blockages. What if the blockage is in the hose? On this machine it's possible to remove the hose. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the camera up on the one side and we're going to turn this over onto its back, and we're going to investigate the various different ways in which we can remove blockages. Okay. Let's lie it down on its back, and then we'll check to see how much we can see on the camera. Right, so what we can do is we can remove the blockage port. Now that basically we need to use a flat-headed screwdriver, and we need to just undo these screws like so. They don't turn round and round like a normal screw, they'll just turn about half a turn anti-clockwise. And then what we need to do is we need to try and fish out this cover. Now that can be a little bit tricky, so you need to get your screwdriver down the side like I'm doing now and gently lever the blockage port up towards you, and it'll come off like so. Okay? Right, now inside here what we can see, there is two air paths. One of the air paths, which is that one there, goes down that hole into the floor head. So if you got a long coat hanger down that hole, it would basically come down into the floor head here, because we've got the hose comes from this point here through the floor head up the neck to this point here. Let me just check that. I think that's how it works, unless that's the suction port. Let me see. It's very, very complex on this machine, the air path, and I've just got to work out now. Actually, does that go to the... Let me just have a quick look here. I'll be with you in a sec. Put that back on the top. It's so complicated, even I'm getting confused here, so if you just give me a couple of seconds and I'll work this one out. I think we're just going to have a look and see where that goes to. I have a feeling what it might do is to go to the hose on the side, to the actual wand. So we're going to take the cable off the top, that's what I'm doing at the moment, so that it gives me access to the rod, to the wand. Lift the wand out at the side, and then I think, or does it? Yes, it does. Right. So, basically what happens is, that one there goes from the floor head through this port here, and then it comes out just here, which is basically where the wand, which is that, docks there. So if your blockage is between the floor head and the wand, we can use this port here to get any blockage out which might be in this vicinity here and the floor head. Then what the air passage does is it goes round the wand, over the other side, into the cleaner here, through this junction here, and then up into the bag from this point here. So your blockage, if it was in this part, you'd be able to get your wire coat hanger up there, round here if it was in the bottom of the hose. So essentially they're giving you sort of a rodding point. If you imagine like a drain on your house, every so often you get what's called a rodding point, don't you, which you can take the lid off and then you can get your drain rods down to be able to remove any unblockages. But basically that is your rodding point there. So any blockage that's in the back of the machine you should be able to get to through these ports here. Now what if it's actually in the floor head itself down here and you can't get to it from that point? So what we need to do then is we need to remove the sole plate. In order to do that we need to use a Torx screwdriver. So I'm going to put this back on the top. Just tighten the tripod up there. It's a little bit tricky, a little bit awkward trying to film this. So I'm going to get a Torx 20 and a Torx 10. Okay? It doesn't use a standard screw to remove this floor head. So what we're going to have to do is going to have to remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So in order to remove the back three, these are a Torx 20, a T20. Right, so we either get a Torx screwdriver with a T20 bit or a Torx bit, and those are available from Halfords or any tool shop. So we need to undo these 3 screws. One. Two. They do take a while to do if you haven't got an electric screwdriver. I used to have one, but unfortunately it doesn't work anymore. So that's the 3. So once we've removed those 3 screws from the top, we need to remove these 3 from the bottom. But those are a T10. So you need to put your T10 screwdriver, remove these 3 here, and be very gentle with these because it's very easy to strip the threads out of the floor head if you're too rough with these, because they're only very tiny screws. So there's the first one. Here's the second one. That's 2. And then the third one. And that's 3. So that should enable our base plate to simply lift towards you. Okay? You don't need to tug the front or the back, you grab it underneath here and you just lift it up away from the machine. Just like so. Right? And there's the bottom of the sole plate. Right, so we'll put that over to one side. So this is what we've got now. Once you've removed the sole plate, you can see effectively that there's the brush roll motor and there's the belt inside here. You should never have to worry about replacing this belt because it's what Miele call a lifetime belt. It's a tough belt. This brush roll rides upon a spring system on either end there. You've got a spring there and a spring loaded connector here. So you've got your base plate off. Now is the ideal time basically to have a good clean up around the brush roll and check for any clogs around this point here. This is where the hose goes out of the floor head. So if you had something long, let me just have a look and see. I've got something long here, but it might be too big to fit in. I mean, you could put something long, like a flexible crevice tool, or anything you could find that was long and thin, essentially, that would go up that hose. I mean, this is basically a long crevice tool off another vacuum cleaner. I could even try sucking that out. Or you could put a wire coat hanger up there and use it as a rodding point here to try and dislodge any obstruction in that hose. And that basically would go, the hose comes through the head and up to the joint here, to that point there. So you could put your rod down that side and up from that side. Or even, like as I say, put another vacuum cleaner pipe up against there and try and suck it out in reverse from that point. But basically that is the only access points that you're going to get to remove any blockages from this machine. It's very, very simple to pull it to pieces like this to get the top off, but not so simple to remove a blockage. Unlike a SIBO where they've got a blockage port underneath, you need to be able to rely on something long, like a wire coat hanger, but be gentle with it because you don't want to poke a hole in that pipe. My best bet really would be, if you've got another vacuum cleaner, is to put your hose up against this and try and suck it out of here from the opposite direction. Undo that, try getting it out from there first. Then you could take off your hose, and I believe to take that off, you pull it up towards you, pull it back, and I think it's supposed to just push straight out of the machine there. But you don't really need to do that, to be honest, because you've got your inspection point here for anything that might have come down the hose and got stuck in that port. Let's say you sucked up a biro pen, it went up the hose, it got lodged basically in that point there. You should be able to maybe get it out through there. But basically, you know, that is what they provide that for, and that is how to get your brush roll cover off. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put the brush roll cover back on. So we'll put the camera back up here while I do that. There we go. So I'm going to basically do it in the reverse procedure, right, of how I took it off. So we're going to get our brush roll cover like that, clean it out, get any obstructions or any crap out of the inside of there before you put it back on. Don't lose this little spring off here because that needs to be on there. And we're going to literally put it back on, push the hose down into its housing there, if it's lifted itself up, and literally press this on the same way as you took it off. It might take a little bit of fettling to get it back on, of rocking it backwards and forwards. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But it should, as long as we're careful. So you're sort of pressing the brush roll down with your fingers and then push it down all the way, right? Because sometimes these springs on the side, these spring-loaded brush roll ends, may well stop this from going on all the way, because obviously they are spring-loaded. So you press that down with two fingers and push that all the way in. You don't need to engage the front, you're just pushing it all the way down, holding the brush roll down. Whilst you're still holding the brush roll, put the middle screw back in on the top and put the middle screw back in on the bottom, and then do your bottom screw up with your T10 screwdriver. Try and hold the brush roll down at the same time so that the sole plate doesn't spring back out on its own. So we're going to do that gently right back up. Once it bites, don't tighten it anymore because it's very easy to over tighten these. Right, and then what we do is just change the screwdriver over to the T20 and do the middle one up on the top as well, so that effectively we've got one screw in on either side in the middle, and tighten that down. Don't over tighten it, just tighten it enough so that it bites. And then it's basically put the other two screws in on the top and the two on the bottom. And then we can tighten them all back down. So we're going to use the T20 to tighten up these two. And incidentally, the brush roll in these is a very expensive part. So if your brush roll wore out and the brushes wore right down on it and you needed to buy a new one, it's about £90 to £100 to replace that brush roll. I've looked on the parts websites and they are stupidly expensive, because according to another guy on the internet that I've seen doing a video, you don't just have to buy the brush roll, it comes complete with all this mechanism here which is the belt and the belt housing as well. So it's like a kit that you have to buy that's not just the brush roll but all the belt and the belt housing as well. So I think that's one of the reasons why the brush roll assembly is so expensive in one of these, because it's not just the brush roll you're buying a lot of other components with it. And what Miele recommend is that you don't try and change the brush roll yourself anyways, that you take it to a vacuum repair shop which is Miele authorised, because it's quite tricky to replace a brush roll in one of these. But you know, they will last and last and last and last, these brush rolls, they really do. It's a very, very good quality brush roll. So all you need to be concerned about really is clearing your blockages out. So you're using, from your end of your hose here, your blockage port there, and then you can use it to get to your hose as well. If necessary, take your hose off the end of here, stretch it straight. You can use your coat hanger down the hose if needed. But now we're going to just put the blockage port cover in. That only goes in one way. You've got a deep part there and a shallow part there. And if you notice, on there you've got a deeper part and a shallower part here. So that will only go in one way, and that is that way. And then you push it down. And then we can tighten up the screws. And again for this, we're using the flat bladed screwdriver, and we're just turning it half a turn until it stops. Don't turn it round like a normal screw, otherwise you'll damage it. Half a turn until it stops. Okay? And that replaces your blockage port. Okay, now we can just basically stand it back up again. I'm sure that these hoses actually just pull off. There is a way to remove it. There we go, that's how it comes off. You basically, you twist the end of the hose like that and pull it, and that will come off that stub there. So if there's anything in there, you can pull the hose off and take it out. Can you see that properly? No, you can't. So what I've basically done, the hose, literally all you need to do to remove the hose, let's just push this round, is grab hold of the hose at this point, twist it round and pull it off towards you, okay? And the hose will come off that point. That'll enable you to hold the hose stretched out vertically, and you can look down the hose, and it should be relatively easy then to look down and remove any blockages, or even put it up to another vacuum cleaner and suck it out in reverse. And then to put it back on, simply push the hose. You've got two lugs on the side like that, and they meet up with the little lug on the side, so you push that back in until it clicks, okay? And that's the hose back on. And then we can push the hose back up and round there. So that's how you remove your hose. So there we go. Let's just stand this back up on the top. So that's basically how you would try and maintain your Miele U1 or your S7 uprights. We've dealt with how to use the bags, how to change the filters, and how to try and go about removing any blockages. They're not the easiest cleaners in the world to remove blockages from. As you see, you've got to take 6 screws out, and you'll need, just remember, if you're in the tool shop, you need a T20 and a T10 Torx screwdriver, like that one that I just used there, and you'll be able to take your sole plate off to get access to your hose underneath. I hope that's been of some kind of assistance to you, and I will see you again soon.